Hello, everybody. How's it going? I was jamming to the StreamYard generic beat there. It's kind of catchy. Debating getting my own beat one of these days. I hope everybody's doing well. And welcome to, I guess this is the third year where I've done, sorry about that, third year where I've done a call in for ex-Muslims in Ramadan. And when I first started doing this stuff, I think for a lot of people, it's a lot of people in the ex-Muslim community, it's Ramadan that's the hardest part because that's really the time, even if you're not living in the Muslim world, where the Muslim community comes together, Muslim families come together, they spend more time with each other, relatives visit, and there's family dinners every day, iftars every day, and that's when it gets the hardest, the most challenging, especially if you're an ex-Muslim who's kind of living a secret life where no one knows that you're an ex-Muslim in your family. And I got a lot of really good feedback the last 2 years that I did it. I left a link for last year's call-in show in the video description below if you want to check it out. And it's just mind-blowing to me how the stories just keep repeating over and over again, how so many ex-Muslims around the world have the same experiences and where they don't really have an outlet to express how they feel or even to just vent. So this is what this live stream is. It's an opportunity for any of you ex-Muslims watching. You can talk about your experience of leaving Islam. You can talk about your challenges with your family. Honestly, you can just call and vent about how hard Ramadan has been, or if Ramadan actually has been going pretty well for you, happy to talk about that too. So for anyone joining in the live chat, you will see the link to call in the live chat. I'll try to pin it just to make sure everybody can easily see it. There we go. So yeah, you can just click the link, and there's an option to not have your camera on. So if you want some privacy, some extra privacy, feel free to just turn off your camera and we can just kind of talk with me on screen. That's totally okay. And there's also a question in the live chat, a poll question. So the question of the day, and this is a question for ex-Muslims specifically, is your life better after leaving Islam? Yes or no? So, it wasn't easy for me to leave, even though I didn't have as much of a struggle in terms of dealing with my family as other ex-Muslims do or did. But even with those challenges, I would say that my life is better after leaving Islam. And so far, we've got 8 votes in, and everyone has said life is better after leaving Islam. 9 votes, 100% yes, 0% no. It's interesting because that's not always the case. It does come with a lot of challenges sometimes. And yeah, so if you want to join, feel free to just click the link in the live chat. I've got it pinned. And we do actually have someone in the waiting room. It's Zara Kay. I see you, Zara. I'll put you on in a second. Zara is an old friend of the channel. Some of you who are longtime members or involved in the ex-Muslim space will recognize Zara. And last thing I just wanted to say, especially for people coming in watching who aren't an ex-Muslim, so talking to Muslims or people who are non-Muslims, and they might ask the question, what is the big deal of Ramadan and being an ex-Muslim? Well, the big deal is that because of the stigma that comes with leaving Islam, because there's, for some people, the threat of being disowned by their families or persecution from the community at large. And in some countries, people deal with death threats over this kind of thing, especially if they're vocal about leaving Islam or critical of Islam. It becomes so hard when the entire community that you're in has now dedicated itself to celebrating this very important part of being Muslim. So you're spending a lot of time with family members, you're preparing meals together, you're having long iftars, dinners together every sunset. People are talking about Islam more, people are reading the Quran, they're going to the mosque more. And so for people who just don't want to participate, ex-Muslims who don't want to participate, they want to keep eating, they perhaps they are practicing another religion now, whatever it happens to be, it becomes so much harder to do this act uh, when it's Ramadan. And if you aren't doing an act and you're out in the open, then you're dealing with all this tension and conflict with your loved ones, friends, your community. So this is why it's a challenge, because there really, I mean, there's a stigma towards leaving Islam, obviously, which can lead to death threats and actually being killed for some people. But there's a stigma of peer pressure and why don't you come to the mosque with me? Why have you given up on your faith? And so on and so forth. And it becomes exhausting to deal with it when you really feel guilty, because it feels like you're spoiling the party, essentially. Everybody, all the Muslims are on board, they're celebrating, they're in this wonderful spiritual place, and you're the one who's not participating or trying to criticize it because you don't believe in it. And so it's hard to not have that inner guilt. And I had that guilt for a long time after I left, especially in the first few years. And last thing I'll say before I put Zara on is the thing that really solidified to me why it's important to talk about this stuff is I posted a video on my channel. It was called Yasin, and I called it a Ramadan Tale. You can go to my landing page on YouTube and you can find it. And it was basically a retelling of a story, a real life story that an ex-Muslim told me, where essentially he didn't live with his parents anymore, but when his mother would come visit him in Canada for Ramadan, they would pray together 5 times a day. And he wasn't practicing anymore. He didn't believe anymore. And he didn't want to break his mother's heart by telling her the truth, because it was so important to her to have this spiritual connection with God and also with her son. And so he would just sit and pretend and pray with her 5 times a day, the entire month. And it kind of blew me away that, first of all, there was this much love between them, and especially from the son towards his mother. And it also saddened me how the son can never really have a full relationship with his mother, and the mother can never really fully know her son. And it's just this religion that's in the way, this thing that promises you all the stuff that we can't see, this afterlife that threatens you with punishment in this life, afterlife that we can't see, and the supposed God who's watching you all the time. And it's a real shame. So the thing that blew me away was someone recently commented on that video just a couple days ago and said that he was going through the same exact thing. So this is sadly a recurring issue, like I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, and this is why it's so important to talk about it. All right, with that out of the way, I'll put Zara on. You can wave at me if you're ready, Zara. Okay, Zara's ready. And we have another person, Youngatheist. I see you. Once we're done, Zara and I'll put you on and we can chat. All right.
Hi.
How's it going? It's been a while.
It's been a really long time. I haven't done a lot of streams and podcasts, to be honest. Like, I saw your Instagram story and I'm like, I want to join. I just want to say hi because
Thank you.
I haven't done it in such a long time. But if the other chat is important, I'm happy to like bounce out. Or if they're comfortable, they can join us as well.
Well, okay, Youngatheist, you can just message me in the private chat if you're okay waiting a bit, or if you're okay just joining 2 of us. Just let me know.
But yeah,
I'll give them a chance to just respond.
Yeah, but it's been a while. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. Third year doing it, and I really, it just really resonates with me how hard this time is for people, especially because I'm fortunate enough where I don't have that struggle. I live alone in Canada. My parents know that I'm an ex-Muslim, and they're mostly supportive of what I'm doing. Not completely supportive. So I'm lucky in that way that I don't deal with the struggles that a lot of ex-Muslims do. So that's why I feel like the least I could do is at least give them a forum to just kind of speak their mind.
I wonder if our parents will ever be fully supportive, or if any parents would be. Like, not just changing religion, like as kids, there's always that generational gap as well.
I know, and I think it's like that element of leaving behind your culture too. Yeah, that's always a struggle.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I was just talking to my family because they're all, I guess apart from me, everybody else is in Tanzania, and my sister's flown there as well. And they're like, we missed you. And they're like, and you know, my siblings always go like, have you fasted? And I'm like, yeah, technically, I just have coffee and water until evening. So I'm like, in solidarity. And I think for me, like, you know, sometimes they're like, oh, maybe you should remind us about prayers. And I'm like, yeah, send it to me. I'll put an alarm. I'll remind you. And just like, I guess we've gotten to a stage where we can just have fun. And
That's
I
good.
guess,
Yeah.
yeah. And I guess they know it annoys me a little, like when they do that, but they don't have any ill intentions and they're not going to actually do it. So it took us a long time to get there, though. It took us a while to get there. But yeah, please have the other person join
Yeah,
us.
all right. Okay, Youngatheist. Youngatheist is okay with talking with both of us on. So I'm going to bring you on in 3, 2, 1. Hello.
Hi, everyone. Hi. I'm your really biggest big fan, and I love both of you.
Hey, Youngatheist, I think there's like a problem with your connection.
Can you hear me?
It's kind of fuzzy. Can you try exiting and then coming back?
Hi.
I noticed that sometimes works.
It's kind of fuzzy. Can you try exiting and coming back? Yeah, sure.
Technological difficulties.
Always happens.
Yeah.
Even living in Sweden, sometimes my internet's just like, I don't want to work. This is it.
By the way, Zara, I'm gonna go to the Dissent, celebrating Dissent conference in Oslo. So I guess I'm gonna see you there.
Yes, exciting. You should
Yeah.
stop by Stockholm. That's what I'm telling all the other ex-Muslims. Like, Oslo is fine, but Stockholm's definitely like the most happening Scandinavian city. Although it's not like London, there isn't much happening.
Of course,
more
yeah.
vibrant.
I'm gonna be there for 3 hours on a layover. For anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, so there's this big annual conference called Celebrating Dissent. There's a lot of prominent names in the ex-Muslim community and also some prominent atheists who have attended in the past. And I was fortunate enough to be invited this year, and it's going to be a very cool experience. I've never been to Scandinavia before, and never done any kind of public speaking in the real world. So I'm curious to see how it plays out. I think Lawrence Krauss was one of the names in the list. I think that's probably the most well-known person, you know, generally speaking, for a lot of people. So yeah, very, very cool. Okay, I think Youngatheist is back. Let's see if we can get him in. All right. Oh, right. Youngatheist, you're on.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but it's still fuzzy.
Yeah, I think it's with my microphone or something. But I'm an ex-Muslim from Pakistan. Yeah, it's an Islamic country, and here it is punishable. But that for to be an ex-Muslim, especially in this really extremist environment, which in Ramadan people become extremely religious, and they always force their religion and their ideology on you.
I'm sorry, we can't really hear what you're saying. Oh, I'm so sorry. There's actually kind of an echo with me speaking as well. Do you have another microphone you can use?
I only have this one. So what's happening? Like you can't hear me or something?
No, it's like really choppy. To me, it sounds like it's the microphone, very staticky.
Maybe remove the microphone and just use your phone.
Now you can hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, hello. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
It's a bit better. Yeah. Keep talking. We can see if we can make it work.
Yeah. So as I told you, I'm an ex-Muslim atheist from an Islamic country. Where being an ex-Muslim is punishable by that, and you can't really express yourself freely, and people around you they are quite extremist and very religious. Some of my fellows they are extreme and
I'm sorry, Youngatheist. It's still not really working. It's like too staticky. Let's try it one more time where you come in and out, and if it doesn't work, I'm sorry. There's like, because people can't really hear what you're saying. Yeah, too bad about that. It sounds like I'm not like a tech expert, but I think it's the microphone they're using, because when you hear that kind of static noise, it's usually because of that. Especially if it's like an old beaten up one.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if they're using VPN either, and that just also kind of makes it works with the connection. But
Yeah,
yeah, Oslo should be fun. I think Sohail has been to Amsterdam and Oslo, and the last one in Germany.
yeah. So Sohail Ahmed, Reason on Faith, who I haven't met in person in Canada, and lovely person.
Oh, I thought you said you haven't met in person.
I
What are
have.
you guys doing in Canada? Like,
Hey, it's a big country.
Yeah, it's like one country. But yeah, it should be fun. It's always interesting to kind of observe different groups of people. And I guess we're still ex-Muslims, but we have so much diversity as well. And differing opinions, but it is quite nice to just be around different people and also get to know other people who, I guess, don't identify with the term ex-Muslim, but, you know, are still like, or relate more to just the term atheist as well. I know when I went to France, there was this whole debate between the French atheists who were from Muslim backgrounds and the rest of us who call ourselves ex-Muslim, and we all discussed it, like, why do we call ourselves ex-Muslims? But
yeah,
that was,
I know. Yeah, it's a relatively new term for me to like describe myself with. I think I only started doing it once I became involved in the ex-Muslim space on social media, because I think it's one of those things where I don't really like the term, because it's essentially still defining yourself by Islam, and it kind of ties into the criticism of not being over it, which is something that I'm sure you've heard some Muslims say. Can't you get over it? Like, you're like what's the classic one? You're like someone who can't get over their ex.
yeah.
And so, but the problem is it's such an invisible group of people. I guarantee you there's tons of people who don't practice Islam anymore in the Muslim world. They just don't talk about it. They don't say anything. They just pretend. And so, even though I don't like it, I feel like it still has a value.
Yeah, I agree. I think I use it, I mean, apart from the online world, by like in person, I only use it when it's relevant. I try not talking about my apostasy with other people unless there's a conversation, but I usually go like, yeah, I was raised religious, and that's it, because I realize that when I tell them ex-Muslims, they don't know what it is, and then I have to go around explaining it, and that kind of diverts from like the bigger conversation that we were having about, you know, anything that comes.
No, it's really, really similar for me. Like, the most I'll ever say to someone, even if they're a Muslim, is I'll just say, "Oh, I'm not practicing anymore." I think, I don't know if you deal with this, but because of my name, my actual name, people just assume I'm Muslim right away, and especially in Ramadan, they're trying to be nice. You know, they say, you know, in a butchered accent, "Ramadan Mubarak," or whatever, and they're trying to be nice, and they're asking me if I'm fasting, and, "Oh, are you okay to have water and stuff?" And it just, I don't really care personally, but it is a reminder of how much is just attached to the identity, right?
Yeah, I think for me, it's mostly been Uber drivers. Like, they're always like,
Yeah.
"Oh, where are you from?" And I'm like, "Well, Australia, but I was born in Tanzania." And they're like, "But where are you originally from?" And I'm like, "Tanzania." Like, so I think for them, it's more like they see my name and they're like, "Where
Yeah.
do we box
Yeah,
you?"
they're trying to, I know, and the thing that I always used to dread, what I actually did with Uber, is because once they saw my actual name, they would get into a conversation with me, and soon enough, I've talked about this on the channel before, within a couple of minutes, we're discussing the corruption of the Western world, and all these things, and then talking about why do the gay people have to have a parade? Why can't they just be at home? And like, I just want to get to this place. I don't want to have this, you know, philosophical, moral conversation with this random Uber driver. So I just changed my name on Uber. So the moment I did that, they don't talk to me anymore, because they can't tell, like, is he Greek? Is he Italian? What is he? Yeah.
I think I had that once, like maybe once or twice, really bad experiences in Sweden where this guy was like, when I read your name, I thought you'd come on like with the full hijab. And I was like, why is this conversation happening in the first place? Like, I just want to get from point A to B. But like today I had an Uber driver who was Armenian, and he was surprisingly like very open-minded. I think in Sweden particularly, or maybe like Scandinavia in general, like even the Muslims I've met here who I would say are technically ex-Muslims because they're atheists, and they grew up very similarly to us as well, but don't really believe in God, etc. I feel like they're a bit more open-minded or relaxed about the whole religion thing. They don't identify as ex-Muslims, but they're still quite, I can understand, like, given how we're told that the West is against, Muslims in general, I can see that they would defend like not Islam, but more like people, even though if they're like, hey, I don't believe in a God, it's ridiculous. But I was actually going to tell you about a story related to Ramadan, which was, I think, maybe 10 years ago now, or 15 years ago. How long ago? I think when I was 16, 17. I don't know how old I am now. 30. So maybe about like 15-ish years ago.
You've reached the age where you don't want to know what your age is anymore.
No, I guess nobody asks. And I'm like, great. Whenever I get ID'd in an alcohol store, and I'm like, oh, come on. Like, and she's like, oh, I still have to do it. I have to ask 50-year-olds. And I'm like, okay. But I was in Malaysia, and now, being a woman and in Ramadan, you always have to hide. You can't eat. Even in front of your parents or like your brother or your dad. And in my family, we slowly eased up that restrictions. Like, we were very open about like, yeah, I have my period, whether it was Ramadan or not. Like, we tried making it acceptable because we're like, I'm your daughter. Like, this is my body. You're an adult. So it was a while, like, it was like at least like 6 years since I've had to like hide that, like eating. So I was very used to like eating in the house and not in secret. And I was in Malaysia, and I was with my friend who's a Bangladeshi. I don't know if it was like, I was a Muslim then, so I was like half hijab anyway. And, go in the store and we both want to eat. And he's like, I'm not serving you food. I'll serve him food. I'm not going to serve you food. And I'm like, we're in Malaysia. We're not in like in Malaysia is very diverse in the sense that some areas are quite strict and some areas are not. So I was in like the international area where like there are a lot of international students and a lot of like the tourist hub anyway. And this guy was like, I'm not serving you food. And I'm like, what? And he's like, you can't eat here. Me and my friend were like, what? And they're like, I'll give you takeaway, but I'm not serving you food in Ramadan. And I was like, I've never felt more ashamed in my life, but I was so angry. And it was, it was quite an experience. Like, it was like full on, like, I'm not serving you.
Did you feel like this air of judgment from that person when they said that?
I mean, yeah, but for him, it was not just judgment. It was this placing authority over me, right? Like, I could like literally have water and an ice cream right in front of me, and that would still piss him off. But it was like, I am not doing this.
Yeah, it's like he didn't want to be tainted by your lack of adherence almost.
Yeah. And I think
it's like you're doing a crime. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I never bothered to understand. I was quite young, but I never bothered to understand whether there's a law around it. Because in Tanzania, they would never do this. Like, you would obviously feel ashamed to eat outside because you're raised in that community. But like, I never knew if like Malaysia had this law that restaurants cannot serve to Muslims. Because they can't really tell like a man is a Muslim.
I know, it's weird how it forces this profiling. Yeah, there's actually a story in the live chat that's kind of similar to yours. So I Am What I Art by Fedwell Qasim says, we're in Spain and we had a Moroccan waitress who heard us speaking in Arabic, came over to our table and told us it's Ramadan and we should be fasting. How dare we eat? Whoa.
Actually, what was interesting, like in Dubai, I was eating during Ramadan, nobody said anything. I was in the mall, like the women weren't eating and nobody said anything. So it was really strange, like how in Malaysia it was just like, different. You're just discriminated, that's it.
And I think for people, especially in the West, they don't really think about countries like Malaysia or Indonesia as those kinds of places where they would be really strict when it comes to those kinds of things that are Islam related. But Indonesia has over 100 million Muslims, if I'm not mistaken. It's like one of the biggest Muslim countries, and the religion is pretty strong there. And you wouldn't think about it though. It's not just the Middle East.
Yeah, which was like what they did like with Bali was they changed their rules. So while it's still kind of a secular government ruled by Muslims and whatnot, they had to change their rules that unmarried couples can't stay in hotels.
Wow.
And that was because it was a tourist hub. And it's only applicable for the most part in Bali.
Really? You know what's interesting? Dubai, I think, had to make a similar kind of change, because I could be wrong about this because I haven't lived there for a long time. But when I used to live there, you couldn't stay in the same apartment. Like you couldn't live, if you were a man, you couldn't live with a woman unless you were married to them. Like you couldn't be roommates, for example, or even just boyfriend, girlfriend. And then I think they recently eased that because they realized like we're not going to be able to continue attracting tourists when we're this strict. So it's an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, how has Ramadan been for you now that you live separately, but you're close-ish in distance with your family?
To be honest, if I wasn't doing this channel, this like activism on social media, I would barely notice it. I don't think much about it. I did get told about it actually from Muslim acquaintances, friends that I have in my community. And again, there's this assumption, oh, are you practicing? Are you fasting? And then I say no. And then there's like that little moment of, okay. And the thing that I find so interesting about it, especially in Canada, is because it's a Western country, pretty liberal, just seeing the inconsistency of how Muslims practice the fasting in Ramadan. Like there's the ones who they'll have sex outside of marriage and drink alcohol outside of Ramadan, but the moment Ramadan starts, mashallah, he becomes super religious and abstains from all of those things. And then there's others who they'll still cheat, like they'll smoke cigarettes and drink coffee, but otherwise they're fasting. So to me, it's interesting how inconsistent it is. It's almost like, I would say, like the slippery slope where people are just like real Muslims even are really, really easing up on it. I kind of wonder sometimes if we're going to reach that point that we see in Christianity for the most part, where like a lot of people still celebrate Easter, like they'll put eggs for their kids in their backyard, but they don't actually practice Christianity anymore. So I'm curious to see if that ends up happening one day, at least in a country like Canada. But yeah, okay, so we have a couple people waiting. So Arif, I see you in the waiting room. I'm going to put you on in a second. I just wanted to show this message from Youngatheist who tried calling in earlier. So I'm sorry that the mic had issues. Maybe it was a problem on the end of the software. I'm not really sure. But Youngatheist says, sorry, can't join, but I just want to say I'm a biggest fan of Zara and you. I recently left Islam and I'm an ex-Muslim atheist from an Islamic country. I wish I could speak, but I can't. Well, Youngatheist, thank you for sharing and for trying. I'm sorry again, it didn't work out. If there's anything you want us to maybe read to everyone watching, just put it in the live chat and I'll put it up, and that way people can hear it. And Robert says, you have the general Mediterranean beauty. Thank you so much, Robert. Oh, maybe he meant you, Zara. I don't know.
I think he was talking about you being from Greek, Italy.
Well, thank you for the compliment. And all right, okay, Arif, I'm going to put you on in 3, 2, 1. Hello, Arif. Are you there?
Hey guys, how's it going?
It's going pretty good, and we can hear you loud and clear.
Good. No mic issues on my end, is it?
That's great. Yeah, yeah. You sound
Cool,
good.
cool.
So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I just actually just jumped on because I've been watching you. I don't know for how long, probably a couple of years, 3 years.
Oh wow.
Don't even know how long you've been doing it, but yeah, I just wanted to say, obviously, you do great work. I love your live streams, and just thought I'd jump in today. Really, I'm not even really sure what the subject is about. I'm guessing it was about Ramadan, guessing that you guys are talking about Ramadan. But
Well, it's open-ended. I mean, like the original intention is just to give a space for ex-Muslims to share their experiences during Ramadan, but we can talk about anything.
yeah, sure. I guess if you were talking about Ramadan, there'd been this. I think. I mean, my experiences with Ramadan. Just to give context, obviously, I've pretty much atheist for 10 years now, so ex-Muslim for 10 years. And my wife's Muslim, though, although whatever we do argue about it, we don't really anymore, really. But in the past, when we have, I think, kind of conceded that, yeah, there's stuff that she can't justify. But I think it's too. I think in terms of personality, she's more on the emotional side, and for her, it's more. She's more socially connected with people, and I think that's a part of her kind of fabric, I guess, her personality. Whereas me, as soon as I figured out this is not the truth, I like it kind of just distanced myself from the religion completely. Although saying that, still my two best friends are practicing Muslim, so it is kind of strange. Ramadan's the only time that kind of gets annoying. I think you guys, you just hinted at it. What you mentioned people becoming more religious in Ramadan, obviously, as opposed to the rest of the year. I think that's the most annoying thing, and just the assumption if I get invited to iftar, then it's just that very awkward time where everybody goes to pray, and then to try and find an excuse, maybe to try and hide for that time.
Oh,
But
that's horrible. Yeah, I don't envy you that.
Does her
well,
family
yeah,
know?
it's
Sorry, I was just gonna ask
well,
if her
yeah,
family knows that.
her immediate family know, but we've never ever really uh, talked about it or anything. My family is pretty liberal, like you know, I'm very comfortable around my family, but with their family, I think they're very just a little bit more conservative in that way. So yeah, it's I was actually supposed to go today, but I've got boiler issues, so I had an engineer come round. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, although the boiler is pretty expensive, so overall it's not a good thing.
Oh, sure, a boiler issue. Yeah,
Oh no, genuinely, the boiler is dead.
we're just kidding with you. Just
I'm
kidding.
yeah, I'm dreading the replacement costs because it is pretty much end of life. So yeah, I'm not looking forward to that. But yeah, the benefit, I guess, is that I managed to duck out of the iftar today. So yeah, it is like with the immediate family, like it was just immediate family today. So yeah, they kind of all know, but it's just like, so when they pray, I'll just be in the kitchen or whatever. It's fine, but it's just where uh, like family friends or people outside that don't really know, that assume, and then it starts to get awkward where they're like, "Oh, where's Arif gone now?" So it's just yeah, that's kind of awkward. But yeah, I think otherwise it's taken a while, but like I say, it's fairly. I think once in a while, my mother-in-law will kind of have a go at my wife. Oh, why is he? What's happened to him? He used to be really practicing this. But yeah, it's you have to. I don't know. Again, my it's not too difficult, but to kind of put you.
I have a
I don't know.
question.
Yeah, sure.
If you don't want to answer it, that's completely fine. But how did you break it to your partner that you aren't believing anymore? Because I feel like I'm sure there will be people who watch this now or later I feel like they're
Yeah.
always struggling with this. And for some of them, it can be a make or break thing. But, you know, it's really hard to confront to somebody you love because you're in that position of vulnerability of potentially being rejected. And, you know, if you already have a good relationship, you also want to decide on that boundaries on when do we not influence each other, what conversations do we have a blocker on. And it's like this exercise that you need to do with your partner every now and then, because new things come up and new issues come up and new challenges come up in your relationship as well. So I'm really curious on how you...
The subject of children, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, great question. Yeah, in terms of my my wife, I wouldn't. In terms of the way, like I said, I was practicing for I don't know, about a year or 2 years when I really got into it, and then yeah, I think I mean, when I was practicing, I mean, didn't miss a prayer for like that whole year, and so although in comparison to the way my wife practices, like for me, when I was practicing, for me, like, you know, music was no go. And I was a massive music fan growing up, and you know, I got rid of all my CDs, and you know, anything that was slightly haram, that was off limits for me. Whereas my wife is still to this day very liberal. Like we've booked a couple of concerts. So she's just more practicing, but nonetheless, it has been difficult because I think we did have a couple of 2-3 years where time to time we'd get into arguments or whatever. I think the kids aspect is a little bit more tricky.
It is because then the family will get involved too. You know, like your mother-in-law will probably have major concerns about the upbringing of her grandkids.
Yeah, that's definitely being the most trickiest part. You know, my wife's wanting for the kids to learn Arabic. You know, to do the go through the Quran recitation, and that's one thing that I'd say no, I'm not gonna. You know, that's a big chunk of time for my kids to go through. I'd rather them put that time into something else. Like my kids are fast. My kids have done fasts in this Ramadan. I'm completely fine with that. In fact, I see some benefit in terms of the discipline aspect. But yeah, it is difficult. But I think me and my wife, we got to a point where we're like, okay, we're not going to really enforce either of our views until they get to a stage where they're a bit older and they start to understand about religion themselves. So yeah, and yeah.
I was just going to say, from not personal experience, but from some of the ex-Muslims I've spoken to, if one of their parents wasn't religious, it was actually quite helpful for them, even if they were, you know, if the other parent was. They really found that support in the other parent who wasn't religious as well, because there was somebody keeping the house grounded a bit more than the strict religious practices that come with Islam as well. I can remember like one of my friends, she's Jordanian and now in the US. And I remember like, you know, she always talked, her father passed, but she always talked so fondly about him because her father was an atheist. And she was raised in a very Muslim-ish, you know, community in Jordan, but you know, a lot of her critical thinking, a lot of her questioning, and even like a lot of her kind of not practicing Muslim was supported by the father as well. And that really helped, and it created a less, I want to say, traumatizing time when you have this crisis of faith of your own. And I think it could still be I feel like languages can be quite valuable. So if you and your partner are able to find a compromise where you're not teaching the Quran, but, you know, spending time on learning Arabic maybe, and see if that is something they enjoy. And if they don't, you tried, you both kind of found a middle ground. I personally feel quite sad that I never paid attention in Arabic class, but that was also because it was enforced with like, you need to learn the Quran, etc. And then when I went to university and a lot of my friends were Yemenis and Saudi, I picked up more Arabic than I did when I was reading the Quran, really.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And to your point, I'm very. I encourage my children to learn Arabic. Like we're going Morocco for holiday. I went there last year as well. So my daughter's got Duolingo. So I said, you can start learning a bit of Arabic here and there on that. For me, it's so much more useful. Yeah, it's a real life skill, learning the actual language rather than just knowing how to recite it. Yeah, and to see your point as well on the parents' side. I mean, I know you're obviously Liam. I know you've mentioned. I'm pretty sure you said your parents not really that religious. I was just wondering, Zara, is it similar to yours? Like, do you have?
No, instantly
Okay,
shook her head.
I'm pretty
No, I
sure
mean,
you've already mentioned this before, but I forgot because I haven't seen you for a while. So I think now I'm remembering. I think you did mention this once. You
they're
mentioned this in the past.
they're quite strict. They weren't like radical. In some ways, quite conservative. It took us years to form a beautiful relationship where we could even talk about mental health. We could talk about differences. I feel like I've challenged a lot of my siblings and sometimes my mom as well, unknowingly, not like actively going like, I'm going to challenge your religion. I tried doing that and they tried doing it. It didn't work out. But I think it took us, it took us a lot of time to find this middle ground. And for us, it was when my whole community hates me actively. So when it was all of them against me, my family felt this innate loyalty towards protecting their own. So what they learned to do was if anybody would tell them about me, they would never come back and tell me. They would just keep it. Like my younger sister was bullied in like 3 schools that she changed because of
Oh
me.
no, really?
And she's like 16 now. She was bullied and, it affected her mental health. And I never knew any of this. Like none of it. It was only when I would talk to my sister and they're like, yeah, this happened and she changed schools. So she's going to madrasa now. And my mom is like, I want you to get out of madrasa. Like, that's my mom. Like, I was forced and dragged to go to madrasa. And for my baby sister, they're like, no, you need to get out. And my baby sister's like, no, I like it. So I'm like, what's happening? Like, why is mom saying this? And apparently, like in madrasa, they talk about apostasy and blasphemy. When did this start? 5 years ago. I had never known what blasphemy was or like, somebody actively doing it. It was always like chatter out there, but never discussed in like the mosque or apostasy. So like, I feel like my family had to go like, okay, well, this is our own. We need to protect our own. And we had to learn and we had to put boundaries. And I'm a bit of like, I have an avoidant personality. So if my parents or if like my mom would say something and I don't like it and I'm like, okay, I'm going to hang up now. And then she'd try calling me or she'd try texting me. And I'm like, I didn't like what you said. And I think over time, she just learned, like, with like Israel and Palestine happening and they never brought it up. Like usually they would go like, do you know this is happening? And like this time they were like, this happened. We don't we don't want you to agree with us or anything. But they were like, they didn't discuss it again, or if my dad sends like any Islamic videos, I just stop reacting and that's it. And like, we just learned how to disagree, but also like just not talk about it. And I think that was the healthiest way we could do it. So when I went to Tanzania in 2020, when I was arrested, I actually developed like a new relationship with my family. It was actually surprising because when I was going there and planning for my trip, I was like full on, like I was taking therapy. I was preparing to have those difficult conversations. I would wear like a bracelet or a hair clip. And like, if I needed to not say something, I was like, okay, I need to prepare all of this so we don't get into a discussion. It never happened. Like, yeah, we would get into smaller discussions. And then in the end, we were just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like even confronting my dad, who's super religious. And I was like, but the Quran says this about women and you have 5 daughters. Like, do you think that we deserve less? Or like, do you think that we're less capable? And he's like, I don't agree with everything in the Quran. I don't think he realized what
Ooh.
he said. I don't think he realized what he said.
Whoa.
And I was like, okay. And I'm like, that's all I wanted to know. I just wanted to know that if it came to like these radical practices, are you able to say no? Which he has, like just having a relationship with me. He's like, yeah. All my sisters, by the way, are hijabis. My nieces who are like 7 and 5. They don't wear a hijab, but like, once in a while, like if they're going to the mosque or dress up, and I get really annoyed. My family knows that I get annoyed. So when they send pictures, I'm like, can you please not? And then they just had to learn to accept that I don't like it. And if we want to remain peaceful, we must respect that, like we can avoid this conversation. Sometimes we might forget. And sometimes if things annoy me, I just go talk to my brother. And I found I found my ways of how to cope being around my family.
So Zara, when you talk to your sisters, is it the same kind of thing where you mentioned how it kind of annoys you? So is that something you just don't talk to them about?
I think I'm closer to my brother. We've always been that way. So it hurt him the most when I left Islam, and it hurt me the most that he did not understand. And then we went for a sibling trip, just me and him, and we had a one-on-one where literally, like, I'm not kidding you, he literally asked me, because like we were sharing a hotel room, and he's like, can I pray in this room? And I'm like, yeah, of course, like I don't care. So if you want me to not sit in front of you, if you want me to, like, I'm like, I can put headphones, like what do you want me to do? And it was like, for me, it was also it was uncomfortable for the first day. And then I was like, oh, I don't have a problem with you praying. I don't have a problem with you practicing. I have a problem when you don't apply critical, like not critical thinking, but you don't apply like consistency in your values, or when you support stupidity because,
Like when you know something is wrong, but because it's being taught by Islam, you kind of are put in this position where you have to at least sort of defend it. I think that's
yeah.
the hard part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, my brother in that trip picked up words like misogyny. We were never like, I didn't know what that word was when I lived in Tanzania. So he picked up that word. And then he would be the one commenting on people's posts when people went like, women shouldn't vote in the community. And he's like, what stupid misogynistic shit is this? And I was like, oh, well done. Like it was a beautiful thing to kind of experience how we were able to change each other's minds as well. And like also them bringing me back to like, I guess, a tolerant view as well. Because, when you come from, especially like for me, I worked with a lot of ex-Muslims who were treated horribly. And that makes you kind of hate everybody, when you see so much shit happening. And, just being around my family brought me back to that balance center and have more tolerance to like, it's not all Muslims, but also like some Muslims hold those stupid ideas because they're never challenged, or maybe I should be talking differently. Because when I feel like everybody who knows me from when I was first an atheist, I was angry. And not like angry atheist. I was angry for women because it was happening in my everyday. Like my everyday was like one ex-Muslim in trouble somewhere in Saudi, in Yemen. And like, it was crazy for me. So I was like really angry at the world, like because nobody wanted to talk about it. So like just being around my family helped me understand that, oh my God, they have no idea what's happening about things that I'm angry about.
Yeah, they don't have that same perspective. It's amazing to me just hearing your story, Zara, is, I think my impression from what you shared was the most important thing, the foundation for your parents was that you're still their daughter and they still love you no matter what. You might have your disagreements, but that core foundation is still there. What scares me is when I hear stories and I see stories where Islam actually shakes that foundation, where parents will side with their religion over their own child. That's like the sad. I think if I was to say in one sentence, what's the saddest thing about Islam or even just organized religion in general, it's when it's capable of destroying that bond.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, despite what happened to me in Tanzania, like I always felt like this immense sense of privilege just to have that basic right of being loved by my family. And in some ways, I felt very guilty about it when I shouldn't, but I felt very guilty about it because somehow somehow many other ex-Muslims too also felt like, oh, but you don't understand. And it's true, maybe I don't understand, but we're having worked so much with other ex-Muslims, it's just like, it opened my eyes. I was never planning to be an activist. Like, I hated public speaking. I could not present, and I was an analyst.
Really?
Yeah. Oh my God, Alib, if you met me like, let's say 10 years ago, like I'm active, I'm a social butterfly, but like going up in the stage, I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, I don't want to do this. At work, I remember telling my manager, and I'm like, I can't present. And he's like, what do you mean you can't present? I'm like, I can't go up. I have like stage fright. But it was the stories of the women, like somebody getting raped or sexually assaulted by their brother. And it was bad. It was just like, okay, well, these girls, like, I didn't even know these girls went through that. And it was also some Muslims as well. And it was crazy. I was like, there's a world outside of this. Like, I felt like I was raised in a bubble. Like, you know, I didn't know that ex-Muslims were, you know, it was a death penalty because I like, you know,
I didn't know that either until after I left.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know about it, and I didn't know ex-Muslims existed. I found ex-MNA, and I'm like, oh, I agree with you as a Muslim, and I'm like, hang on, but what makes me a Muslim at this point? I'm not praying, I'm not fasting. I was attached to the idea of Ashura, and then my last Ashura that I went was literally like was one of those things that made me an atheist was when this Iranian preacher was talking in English, and this was in Australia. And he was all anti-Jew. Ashura had nothing to do with that. He was like, we should despise the Jews, we should break their communities. And I was like, whoa, like, what is happening right now? What is happening right now? Like, I was just mind blown. And I'm like, I've never been around these people. Like, you know, Iranians are a bit very like radical, like Iranian Muslims or Shias are like they're more radical than like how I was raised. And for me, it was just like, where am I right now? Like, Ashura was the one thing I was attached to, and then I see this happening, and I'm like, I don't want this.
It's not what you're about. Yeah.
No, it was so like, even like, you know, that was my first one, and then my breaking point was fighting for homosexuality rights within my community. And, you know, they were based in Vancouver. So I think a lot of people would have heard about it. If you're in Canada, like this Muslim got married to a non-Muslim, and it was like, it made the news, it made the podcast. It was back in 2017, and it was from my community. And it was just like, I stood up for it, and I got hate. I got so much hate. And I was like, and my dad would call me, and he's like, why did you write that? You need to delete it. And I'm like, no, I'm not deleting it. And he's like, okay, then we're done. And I'm like, okay, bye. And I was just like, so my brother was commenting, and he's like, you can't support homosexuality. And that's where I came from. And now we're so different people. Like, just seeing that hate, and then me trying to like literally screenshot what I was receiving and showing my brother. And he's like, yeah, but they're just angry. Why did you provoke them? And I'm like,
wow, so it's your fault. It's your fault.
I provoked them.
Yeah, best to stay silent. But here's the cool thing, and Arif, we're gonna get to you in a second. Sorry, we kind of took over.
Sorry.
No worries.
That's I think the cool thing about what you're doing too is beyond like the impact you've had on, I don't even know how many people, ex-Muslim women, but think about how your ideas, your arguments have probably seeped in with your own family, right? So maybe they don't hold on to their biases and assumptions as much as they used to when it comes to something like homosexuality. And I really do think those kinds of things can grow and expand from like what we do to a lot of other people.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of young girls, like, I'm not kidding you guys, like, I had a girl who messaged me, like this was like 5 months after I went public. She's like, my mom was forcing me to pray. This is on social media. And she's like, I told her, if you force me again, I'm going to tell Zara. I don't know this girl. She's from my community, but because I was so talked about, younger girls were like, oh, you're forcing religion on me? I'm going to tell Zara. I was like, what? What is happening? And I had people who were like, oh, you were talked about in our madrasa class and I defended you and people bullied me. And I'm like, don't do it. Pretend like you don't know me.
I have a question for you, Zara, and then we'll get to you, Arif. So A. Jansen asks, listening to you is so refreshing. More people need to hear this. Have you thought about going on cults to consciousness?
What is that?
I'm not sure. Hold on, I'm going to Google it.
Yeah, I want to.
Cults to consciousness. It seems like it's a podcast. Stories of claiming independence after leaving high control groups. And it looks like it's hosted by a former devout Mormon. Interesting. Well, I haven't heard of them, but I'm definitely going to check them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did this podcast with like a woman who left the ex-Jehovah's Witness, and we did like this thing on BBC, and it was so interesting how she grew up a bit like quite stricter than I did, but then the consequences that we had were also very different as well. Which, you know, because they asked both of us, they're like, what do you fear the most? And I was like, I could be killed. And she was like, whoa. But we had so much in common, and that was really nice to kind of see that. I guess in a way that, you know, we go through so much together and differently, and I wish other Westerners actually saw that.
Definitely.
Because I feel like they'll talk about ex-Christians and they'll talk about ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, and then we're like, oh. And
then we're the unknown, invisible, because I think an element of it is, and this could be like a whole other conversation, but I think a lot of people in the West, they don't want to tread on Islam's toes because they don't want to appear offensive towards it because it's from a different culture and all that. I understand that, I suppose, especially if you're from the West, but I do think that it's important to give them a voice. And A. Jansen actually says the host said they really like to hear from ex-Muslims. So I think I'll definitely check it out. Yeah, maybe there's something we could do there. Not sure. So Arif, thanks for holding on there, hanging on. I had
No worries.
one question for you.
Yeah.
Is there anything you're looking forward to or dreading for the rest of Ramadan?
Looking forward to dreading.
Or dreading.
No, I think, to be honest, it's not really. Like I say, apart from just trying to dodge some iftars that I don't want to go to.
Is there anything else you can break in your apartment, your house?
Yeah, no. The thing is with my wife, she knows it's if it's just her immediate family, I'm fine. But she already knows as well. If it's like people from outside, then she knows that's a no straight away from me. So it's not that bad. And then I guess the other thing is some of the conversations on Eid and figuring out how to avoid, like just simple stuff like, Eid Mubarak, oh, where did you pray this morning? Yeah, I didn't. You just have to. But most of the times, oh no, I was too busy at work and I couldn't make it. Or whatever. Some people don't know. So it's just lying, which when I don't want to lie.
I know it's so awkward. Have you ever pretended? Have you ever just gone along and just prayed, even though you're after you stop practicing?
When I stopped practicing, I think I kind of did. To be honest, it's so long. And then the only time I did ever actually pray was like if there was a funeral. I think that's about it. And then even there's unfortunately a couple of funerals that happened in COVID. I went to the funeral, but I didn't pray. And I was like, yeah. I was like, well, I've come to the funeral. I paid my respect. I've gone to the graveyard. I don't have to actually pray. So yeah, even that. And nobody really, it's not like I think sometimes we kind of, or in my opinion anyway, like sometimes we may think that it's worse than it's actually going to be, and sometimes, to be fair, obviously it is. But a lot of the time, I think not many people actually care. It's a very, I think it's a small minority.
That will
in my
actually,
case,
yeah, I think so too. I think the one thing that we can't avoid, unfortunately, is that little element of judgment that we might not even hear about. So, like the thing that I sometimes, I wouldn't say I'm paranoid about it, but I'm aware it's a possibility, is I suspect that there's been conversations, for example, about me between two Muslim friends of mine saying, can you believe this guy? What do you think he's all about? Like, well, why did he stop praying? Why doesn't he do this? So I can sense that those conversations have happened without me being present. But I think I really admire that you're still standing up for what you believe, or I should say, don't believe, and not just going along and pretending and lying. I know that there's some people where just for their own safety they have to lie, and that sucks. But if we can do it safely, I think it's really good to just stand up and not lie and not pretend. So I'm glad that you're capable of doing that at the very least.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks.
I was also gonna say, I mean, unlucky for you guys, you're not women, so can't pretend to be on your periods.
Yeah, yeah. I have a feeling that doesn't compensate for all the other stuff that a Muslim or ex-Muslim woman has to specifically deal with. That's like a whole other ballpark, and I can't even imagine, really.
I mean, I guess the good part is that we never had to go to the mosque and pray, or were never required to, and that way we could just dodge everything. Like, I guess not everything, but like that aspect of it. Sorry. The amount of times, like, I guess my mom was very, very like a softie, right? Like if I just go like, I have a migraine, I can't fast. And she's like, okay, just drink water. Just drink water. Allah knows best. Like, just do this. And I'm like, my tummy aches. And she was such a softie. She's like, yeah, okay, do what you want. And yeah, I think it was only when we were kids which is really weird. Like when we were like 5 or 6 and they're like, oh, there was this challenge and like, oh, my kid fasted today. The 5-year-old fasted. So she felt a bit of a pressure to do it.
Wow.
And it was a competition. I'm sure my sister does it with her kids. No, I guess no. Yeah, it was a Ramadan competition for kids. You get presents if you fast, if you're not 9.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Now that you mention it, I remember as a kid wanting to start fasting as soon as I could. And I think it was like kind of like a mark of adulthood kind of thing. Like, look at me, I can actually handle fasting all day. I'm just like a grown up and super proud of myself for doing it. And it's interesting how that kind of works in terms of just indoctrination too, right? Like kids just want to emulate the grown-ups they see, and then that's part of how you get sucked in.
Yeah.
Can
I just quickly ask you?
Yeah, go ahead.
How long did that enthusiasm last?
For me,
did you have that? Yeah.
For me specifically, I mean, one thing I will say is the whole time I was Muslim, I never looked at it as a burden or as like a chore I had to do. I always, if anything, it was the opposite, because I was never good at the 5 prayers a day thing. I was always very inconsistent and guilty about it, and guilty about other things like, oh, I checked out this girl on the street, or looked up a naughty website or whatever as like a 13-year-old. And so that Ramadan was my opportunity to finally do something right. So that's how I kind of looked at it. And it was I would say the last thing I really did as a practicing Muslim was fast for Ramadan. And I knew really it was over once I hit that 1 year. I think I was 18 at that point, where I just didn't fast. I just kept eating like I normally did.
I think I was enthusiastic about it until when it became wajib on me, like until when I had to do it. So as a kid, I was like 7, 8, yeah, I want to do it. Some days I would do it because it was all about iftar than it actually was about fasting. It was all about like eating that food after being hungry. And it wasn't like healthy food because it's a lot of snacks. I don't know if you guys have it in your homes where it's like the buns, the burgers, the little burgers, the pizzas that you don't usually make for dinner because you'd rather eat like rice and curry or like pasta maybe. So I think for me it was all about the iftar, that it was about fasting. I don't think I ever drank, like I know a lot of people drank water in the bathroom, but I think for me it was just like, if I was fasting, I'm gonna do it. And if I do that, like when there were times when I was like more religious and I was like, no music, like I go hardcore, like full everything, proper hijab, no music, abaya, like everything. And then a month later, like not just Ramadan, like any month. And then I'm like, okay, I can't do this. I don't want any of this. So it would be really like up and down.
Kids in my school would do the tongue test though to see if you're cheating. So they would say, show us your tongue. And if your tongue was all, dried out and dehydrated and white, that means you're actually fasting. So couldn't even get away with drinking water if you were, cheating.
Yeah.
Because you're cheating God after all in the end. Yeah. Afreen Sheikh in the live chat had a few comments. I literally am doing it right now since my mom is forcing me to pray. I just pretend. Yeah. I mean, it's such a recurring thing. Yeah. And Afreen continues, I used to be overly involved in Islam only to make my parents proud. Sorry if you're going to say something.
No, I was just going to say, I do find it, I just, like, it feels like if you're kind of forced to do it, and you very quickly will not want to do it. But when it's kind of just like, it's the same with my kids. Like I said, with Ramadan, they no one's forcing them, but they've quite enthusiastic about it. And similar with like wanting to like read Quran because some of their cousins do it or whatever. It's like it becomes kind of somewhat of a competitive.
Yeah, it's fun, and I think it's the element of how it's like something different to do. I think it really does work how in the West the Christmas holiday season works, because everyone's doing things together. The schedule changes. You're doing things as a family. I remember I used to just like be sitting waiting this was in Dubai, waiting for the cannon to fire because that signified sunset. So it really was like this thing of excitement and looking forward to it. And in a way, I do miss that element of community. It's just one of those things where it really does feel like it was a past self. Like it doesn't feel like connected to who I am anymore. Arif, is there anything else you want to share? I do see two people in the waiting room. NaZone 75. If you want to come on, just let me know in the private chat. Not sure if they're connected or not. And Youngatheist, I think, is going to try again. But yeah, before we get to them, Arif, is there anything else you want to share before we let you go?
No, just so I mean, nice talking to you guys. Obviously, you guys mentioned the celebrating Descent. I was actually thinking of coming to that as well because I did actually go to this I always forget the one in Zara. You must know, obviously, the Marina Namazi's CMB, yeah. But stopped. Haven't gone for a while. But yeah, I've always wanted to go to one of these. Quite keen. So maybe we'll see you guys there as well.
Yeah, if you do go, I would love to meet you in the real world, IRL.
Yeah, that's
I guess you get to actually experience the clean water that we have in Scandinavia, the clean streets, the non-friendly people.
You know, Zara, there's something I saw. I'm not sure if it was Norway or Sweden, but so in Canada, the real estate situation is a nightmare. Housing affordability is a nightmare. And someone on TikTok has a channel where she compares, like basically it's like a game. Like you have to guess, is it a Norwegian or Swedish prison cell, or is it an apartment for rent in Canada?
Definitely Norwegian.
Norwegian, yeah. So it's like a little bit of commentary on how nice the Norwegian prisons are, but also how sad the apartments are in Canada these days.
No, I mean in Sweden as well. Like our apartments, like you have to be I guess you have to do really well for yourself to be able to afford a good apartment, and people don't rent, they buy here. But like, yeah, the Scandinavian system does not believe in punishing. It believes in, what is that? a rehab center. Yeah, rehab center. Yeah. Which can be really bad because it really backfires. And it also gives ammo to the far right then as well, because they start targeting, or they start putting more focus on non-white people, or rather non-Swedish people. It doesn't even matter if you're white.
Definitely. Yeah, I've heard that kind of thing before from some friends who've lived in the area, especially like if they come from my background or just like from a Muslim background. But yeah, Arif, okay. NaZone is ready to come on, so we're gonna say goodbye to you. Thank you so much for calling in and sharing. I wish you the best of luck with the boiler and any other parts of your house that mysteriously break down over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, cool. Nice talking to you guys.
We'll see you in Oslo.
Yeah.
See you in Oslo, Arif. All right. Okay. NaZone, I'm gonna add you in a sec. There's a comment for you, Zara. Zara has such a cute dog. All right. Yeah, I did see the dog come in for a second.
Yeah, he's 9 months now. We took him to a training indoor hall, like dog hall, and we're just playing for like an hour and a half. And he was meant to be really tired, very selective.
Gonna need another walk.
It is definitely like having a child. Like the first few months, I was like, I've slept for 3 hours each night. I mean, picking up vomit, poop, pee.
One of the many reasons I don't have a pet. Maybe one day. Who knows?
They're fun though. They're fun though, but I definitely recommend like 2 people taking care of 1 pet than like 1 person. So me and my partner, like right now, is like, oh, he needs to go pee. So can you take him? But I just wanted to like, I have to go. I have a call with other ex-Muslims.
Well, thank you so much for joining. Yeah, this was an unexpected pleasure.
Yeah, I saw it and I'm like, oh, I don't look like shit because I actually came back home. So I'm like, oh, maybe I can do this. Somebody asked me on the AP versus Aladdin situation.
Let me see if I can find that. Okay, we'll talk about that for a second because I actually don't know your opinion on the whole thing. So yeah, the question is, where do you stand on Apostate Prophet versus Apostate Aladdin? Just to give context for people who might not know, and then I'll let you share your opinions. So basically, Apostate Aladdin posted a video outlining his concerns with Apostate Prophet's views on Israel and Palestine, and also that he collaborates pretty frequently with someone who's a Christian preacher. And just for context too, I pretty much agree with Apostate Aladdin from my end, and I did a live stream with him about it before he posted his own video.
So I'm going to preface by saying I did not hear Apostate Prophet's. I haven't been following him for a while. Like a lot of you know that I'm not very active because I got life going on. I didn't hear about Apostate Aladdin's video. I know it happened. I know there's drama, but like, you know, I feel like all of this is in some way quite healthy, right? It keeps many of us in check. It tells us that we're not all the same. I know some people complain that Apostate Aladdin should have messaged Apostate Prophet, but I feel like that's a bit hypocritical because when I was arrested, Apostate Prophet didn't message me. He made videos about me. It wasn't my views. I was a victim of something. I was in a dangerous situation, and people still thought it was okay to make videos about me. And I think that's where the hypocrisy is. At the same time, I can understand that people want a heads up. And, you know, there was a time on Twitter, I disagreed and I said something that Apostate Prophet did was misogynistic. And then I thought about it for a few days and then I messaged him and I'm like, hey, I hope you're well. I'm sorry I did that tweet. I think I acted on impulse, but I should have reached out to you. Like, you know, we've talked before. You're not a stranger to me. But you know, when this streams happened and, you know, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, you should have messaged him or you didn't conduct it properly. And I mean, we're not infallible. None of us, right? We're going to be wrong. We're going to have methods that others don't like. It doesn't mean that we're always right. Should AA message Apostate Prophet? Maybe. But did he feel like what he was doing was what felt good to him? Sure. Does he regret it? parts of him might in the future, maybe not. But I feel like a lot of this making it to be like I'm against this person holistically is false. I feel like we have some things in common. We have a lot of differences. So I'm more about like, yeah, you guys should go online, oppose each other, because it's not like you don't do this to other people you don't agree with. You know, when Ayan Hirsi wrote her book, or something a lot of us didn't agree with, and we didn't message Ayan Hirsi when we talked about it. We didn't message Richard Dawkins when we disagreed with him. So, you know, like we've had a lot of these things that, you know, we didn't like give the person a heads up. But I think the toxic part of it is, I mean, I didn't watch the video, so I can't really say there was a toxic. I think the toxic part of it is when other people talk about like this being drama.
Well, it's one of those things where I think you've been around for a long time. You definitely remember that these sorts of disagreements and personality conflicts have happened in the past, right? Like over different issues.
Yeah.
But I think you're right that it is a good thing to kind of air out the differences. For me, the thing that I noticed right away is like I would say the way that a lot of other ex-Muslim YouTubers with bigger followings than Apostate Aladdin kind of, to me, it seemed like they were capitalizing on the whole thing for views. I'm not going to name any names, but
I feel
people
like
will probably guess who I'm talking about.
I feel like we've all capitalized on views. I feel like we've all done it. Like
For sure. Well, this is that. Like, I just had like a second point to that.
Yeah, sorry.
Is sure you can talk about it, and I don't even think either way the direction of Apostate Aladdin owed Apostate Prophet an invitation or a private conversation first, or that they owe Apostate Aladdin that now. It's more that, to me, when I was watching the feedback coming from some people, it seemed pretty clear to me that they either weren't really paying attention to what Apostate Aladdin was saying, or they didn't watch the entire video from just their hot takes on it. So that's what I mean by the capitalization, where at least give like a thorough assessment of it. Like, I actually see where this person is coming from. And like one thing I noticed, and this is like the last thing I'll say about it here, is accusations against Apostate Aladdin that he was being a narcissist and telling people what they were supposed to do and how they should do it. If you watch his video, he actually says we shouldn't listen to any one person. We shouldn't idolize any one person. We have to ask questions and not idolize people. So he's not saying idolize me and do everything the way I do it. And I think that was lost on some people, probably because they didn't watch the video until the very end.
But I also feel like if Apostate Aladdin reached out to somebody privately, isn't that what you asked them to do? So if somebody's reaching out to you privately and they're like, I don't like it, blah, 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 great. But you literally asked Apostate Aladdin to have reached out to AP privately. And he did to another person. And I may not like if somebody does that to me, but he did have the courtesy to do it to somebody he felt comfortable doing it. My point when Harris made the video, and I told Harris, and I'm like, I don't agree with you, but you know, I was like, look, Apostate Prophet in the past has never reached out to people privately to do this videos, right? He's never gone out to people and go like, I will say no to you, etc., 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 because he didn't do that to me. He may have not done it to other people. So you can understand that when he does this, he doesn't give that impression that, oh, I'm open to feedback and criticism, or, you know, you can reach out to me privately. That is probably not the impression Apostate Aladdin got. Maybe. But I do feel like, I guess what really frustrated me when people are like, I stand with AP, and I'm like, I'm sorry, what are you standing for? What are you standing for? Nobody has removed his rights. Like people are saying they don't agree with him, right? Like, that's it. Like, but what are you standing for?
I think just people love those kinds of
like,
the conflict.
I stand with this, and I'm like, no, sorry, there's no standing here. You know, if somebody thinks they need you to be one versus the other in this situation, I feel like you're not getting the point then. You're really not getting the point. And I know you posted like an Instagram post talking about like, you know, I guess, about, does Apostate Prophet represent ex-Muslims?
Yeah,
And
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and my view was, no, he doesn't. He doesn't represent ex-Muslim any more than I do. We are ex-Muslims. He doesn't represent the community. I don't think he's ever said he does, but I can see how people think. But then I feel like it's a lot on people. Like you said, I think you said what Aladdin said was, we shouldn't idolize people. And if other people do it, it's on them. I mean,
Definitely. Yeah.
people have so much to disagree with me, great, that's fine. I want to say I do not care, but it's more like it doesn't affect the validity of the things that I say, that they do, that can be true, even if they don't agree with me. And very similar to my Muslim family may not agree with me blaspheming, but they do agree that people shouldn't be killed for blaspheming, right? They don't have to agree with me, but there are some facts. So I get really annoyed when people are like, oh, I stand with the Apostate Prophet, or AA did this. And I'm like, you know what, guys, this is going to pass. People are going to forget. And the more time and energy we spend dissecting it, the more time and energy we're not spending on making our lives beautiful, or actually doing something productive with this discussion. What did that teach us? Is there another view? Can people have radically different view reading the same thing? Yes.
Yeah, I think to me it showed that there is this, I don't know whether to call it a philosophical difference or ideological difference amongst ex-Muslims. So I would say someone like Apostate Prophet, his goal is he wants to tackle Islam, and someone like me or Apostate Aladdin, we want to do that too, but we also want to be the space for ex-Muslims and support them as much as possible. And I think there's just differences in opinion on how best to do that. So, for example, for me, I couldn't just collaborate with someone who's a Christian preacher, even if he's not directly preaching it in the videos with me 3-4 times a week, because I know that the harms of Christianity, there are a lot of similar harms as there are with Islam. So one example would be the fear of hell. There's a lot of Christians that have this fear of hell, and that can cause so much suffering. And I think I feel like there's a little bit of protective side towards ex-Muslims being exposed to the thoughts of Christians without sufficient challenge that you don't get with Apostate Prophet. And he's explained all this stuff too. That's the other thing to know. These are all old arguments that Apostate Prophet has dealt with in the past, essentially.
I mean, one of the examples that I had recently while this was happening was also somebody reached out to me for No Hijab Day from India, and they were like, hey, can you be on our stream? And I've been told about this person, how he's very anti-Muslim, but I still went okay, if it's no hijab, I know where I can handle myself, etc. And then I saw his reel very recently. So I never went for that, that live stream because I was busy, I had work. And then just a few days ago, I saw his live stream where he's like, all Muslims are terrorists, etc. And I'm like, I'm sorry, are you mad? Is this a joke? I'm not yelling at you, but is this a joke? And he's like, you should do this exercise. Every Muslim family home is a terrorist home. You can do this exercise depending on what percentage is it, what percentage of radicalism is there. And I'm like, in that case, we're all terrorists. If that's our definition of every family that holds conservative ideas or toxic ideas are terrorists, then we're all terrorists. And he was just like, no, you're wrong. We're talking about Muslims. And I'm like, anyway, what led to it was I went there was a reason why I said no to the stream. It was because we don't have shared values. And that to me, I wouldn't spend my time on Islamists. I'm not going to spend my time on this. That to me is just no, I'm not doing it. And then he was like, oh, you're believing in cancel culture. You're canceling me. And I'm like, you're not the victim here. Me not wanting to talk to you is a personal choice. I don't want to spend that time. And then you go around telling things that like, oh, I'm canceling you because I don't believe that, you know, all Muslims are harmful. And it's very similar, right? Like,
Definitely.
if you don't have shared values, that's okay. Like, that's fine, right? And we shouldn't be wasting our energy on that. So I can see how even in the ex-Muslim community, like still ex-Muslim, and we're like very radically different at the same time. This person might as well just go make a video about me to his Hindu followers. What am I going to do about it? Like, why would I go after him? I mean, people have done worse. I've expected it from Muslims, and some ex-Muslims, unfortunately, have, you know, made my private life public, even when it had nothing to do with me disagreeing with him. I did not like it.
I remember that, yeah.
But what people ultimately saw was that if this person had a valid argument to like criticize me or like my personal life, people in the end followed her anyway. But when they saw that this, like, you know, when our mutual friends saw what she was doing, they made their decision on what kind of people they want to be around. And that's fine. I think for me, I think the most heartbreaking thing for me with like all of this was when Apostate Prophet talked about the ex-Muslim civil war in 2020, which was my arrest. It wasn't a war. This was something that happened to me that I think a lot of people know that I don't really talk about this. And he made it sound like he had nothing to do with it. And that was such lies, because people politicized and made it their personal agenda to continue hurting me. And that's when I was like, that's not nice. Like, you make it sound like you want nothing to do with this drama, but you are the center of it. And that was possibly something that made me really mad. And that was probably like, I guess, and that kind of informed me, like, if he didn't write me a message, how can he expect other people who he's not even close to, has never spoken to, write him a message?
It's tough, like that question of expectation. I think I know you said you want to drop out, so we can like
That's okay.
wrap this up in a bit. But yeah, I think there's like this element of you have to be have this allegiance to the cause, or like not attack one of your own in the great cosmic battle against Islam. And I think that's playing a part of it with some people, like that it's bad strategy to target another ex-Muslim. Even that word target, like in the end of the day, I think it's like really the ideas and the arguments that should be focused on, not the personalities. But that's the thing about social media and the internet, like it's really hard not to do that. It's really hard to have nuance in these kinds of disagreements too.
I also feel like it would be very different if you and I had this conversation and we're in a place where, you know, we can talk to each other, and then you started making a video about me, because I am approachable in this context. But if somebody else did it, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't like it. But at the same time, maybe I wasn't approachable to them. So I think there's a massive difference. Like if we were friends and then somebody went outside to kind of break that, even if they disagreed with me, I think that would hurt a lot more than, like, you know, other people doing it.
I see your point, yeah. And
Like,
reason on Faith had this to say, I do think the diversity of views is helpful. Sometimes it's difficult to have a candid conversation directly and upfront, unless two people know each other really well or have equal-sized channels, which is not the case with Apostate Prophet and Aladdin. That's like I think another thing that seems to be glossed over is like Apostate Prophet is the biggest English-speaking ex-Muslim YouTuber. He has 20 times, I think, the number of subscribers as Apostate Aladdin. It wasn't like a, you know, punching down kind of thing either.
yeah. I mean, one of my closest friends probably holds similar views to Apostate Prophet, but I was able to confront him, and I was like, look, I don't like this, and he explained where he comes from, and he explained that maybe, like, you know, I have some validity. Like, I think a lot of you probably know Luai on, he's from Yemen, he's on social media, and he works with Builders of the Middle East, and he did a lot of like Israel-Palestine video, and I feel like he's more approachable, and he's more willing to actually, like, he's doing it with somebody who's pro-Palestinian, and they constantly challenge each other, right? So I feel like there are people that can be approached and will take it better, and then maybe some people don't.
Yeah,
I don't know what point I was making. Like, I feel like I have these friends who are pro-Israel. I have friends who are pro-Palestine. I have friends who are pro-Hamas. I mean, I don't know if we're friends, but I consider them as a friend. We just said that, hey, we're not going to talk about this, and I'm like, okay, cool.
well said. Yeah, and Gerwalk, by the way, just thanks you for sharing all of this really interesting viewpoints and history.
Okay, I should really go. Sorry for taking over your stream.
No
This
worries,
is
no
really
worries.
nice. I haven't done it in such a long time.
It was so good to see you again. It's if nothing else. It was nice to catch up with you.
Yeah, this was really nice. Thanks, Sohail, as well on the chats. But bye, everyone.
All right, bye, Zara. All right, we have NaZone waiting in the waiting room. There was one question for Zara as well. I might get to that at the very end of the live stream because it was addressed to both of us. So NaZone, I'm going to add you in 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello.
Hi, Alim. How are you?
I am doing very well, and I think this is the first time we've ever actually spoken, isn't it?
You for a while, actually, and yeah, it's a pleasure.
I know. Yeah. You've been supporting my channel for like a long time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess this is like very long, very, very long delayed.
Yeah. So thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. I want to commend you and, of course, Zara for you know, I'm a little older than you. I'm in my mid-40s. It took me a long time for me to come out of Islam, I guess, and it was a long road. So I would just want to commend you for your bravery and for your critical thinking.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that doesn't come so easily. You know, I know it took me a long time, you know, for me to go through that. So I'm not sure where I want to start. So I don't know if you want to ask me any questions. I think you probably know because I've mentioned it. I am Palestinian-American. Was born and raised here in the U.S. I did spend time in the Middle East, both as a child, but also as an adult for work. And that really kind of shaped me in a lot of ways. It shaped me in how I view Islam and also how I view the Arab world as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure where you want me to start. If you want me to if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer you.
Well, I know you said in the private chat that you want to kind of address the whole Apostate Prophet, Apostate Aladdin thing, especially as a Palestinian. Before we get to that, I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about what Ramadan is like for you now. Like, I'm curious to know what your situation is. Like, is it something that your family is aware of that you don't practice anymore? Or
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my family's aware that I don't fast. They know that, my immediate family. So like, you know, my parents, my brothers, our immediate family, you know, my sister and so on, they know that I don't pray. They know I don't fast. We've had some pretty you know, interesting conversations in the past, not just about Ramadan, but just about faith in general. So they know that they know I don't fast. But I still participate in a way that I still go to the iftar. I still, you know, like a previous caller mentioned, if there's a death, I still go and I pray with them. I kind of view it as a respect for the people that I'm friends with or family. It's kind of like wishing someone Merry Christmas and not celebrating Christmas and so on. So I do that as, you know, as a sign of respect for them. You know, of course, you know, Muslims, and especially, I don't know if just Arab Muslims, you know, they tease you about it. You know, like my immediate family, they'll say, "Oh, you look so hungry today," you know, something like that, knowing that I didn't fast. But I typically try not to eat that much that day because I do want to enjoy it with them. But yeah, so I think they've gotten over it. It's been a few years now, so they pretty much accept it.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, I can really relate to that element of when after I left and I was amongst Muslims or in a Muslim country, I would feel guilty about eating in front of someone. I think that's something that's shared by non-Muslims too. I suppose the next question that would be good to ask you is there anything that you miss about Ramadan, like from when you were younger and still practicing?
Yeah, I miss being part of like the community aspect of it, kind of like joint suffering, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like a community where we all kind of feeling very similar things. And even though the older I got, I realized it really wasn't that great because, my parents would have headaches and if they were sick, they weren't feeling well. And what it was really kind of going back to, living in the Middle East as an adult, they practice it a lot different than we practice it in the West. They sleep most of the day, and depending what part of the Middle East that, depends where you are, they hardly work. A lot of things shut down. They have this like afternoon thing where people go home and sleep. And by the time they come back, the stores open up again. So it's really not as, again, maybe that's what it was intended to be. And, us being in the West, we do everything to the extreme. I don't know. Right. So I think it's a lot easier to be Muslim in the Middle East, just at least during Ramadan. I don't want to say,
because the society adjusts towards it. What I remember growing up in Dubai is the pace of things definitely slowed down a lot. It's like people were in semi-vacation modes. There would be like less traffic, less cars on the road. People just be more relaxed overall. I remember having shorter school hours and not as much homework. They wouldn't schedule exams during Ramadan as well for us.
Right, exactly.
So I can see what you mean by it being a lot easier.
Yeah.
And I do remember doing the nap thing. And did you ever do this, like waking up like 4 a.m. and just having like an extra meal right before sunrise?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was younger, I really enjoyed that because it was like something out of the ordinary,
Yeah,
really
exactly.
enjoyable. But the older I got, it's like, I still got to go to work. That kind of throws me off. And then, being a coffee drinker, that's that suffering of having coffee and then try to take a nap again before it was just like, yeah, it wasn't easy. And then, trying to manage those in the family that take medication. And it's just, I don't know. There were some things that I do miss about it, that getting up and, and seeing your mom in the kitchen and making something. It wasn't, I'm sure everyone knows it's nothing heavy, but it's just the aspect of just being around it and enjoying it together.
I know it's like a really beautiful thing, and that's why it's so hard when like you just can't participate in it. And I think from some Muslims, they look at you and they think like, but why? Like this is such a nice thing, and they don't see, I guess, the dark stuff that's underpinning it, if you know what I mean. By the way, we got a comment in the live chat. So Olga says, sleeping all day, not working. The guy selling Islam to me. So, oopsie.
No, I mean, just to add to that, when I worked, and I don't want to get too specific, when I worked in the Middle East, it was because I worked for an American company, and it was the least productive time of the year. I mean, we got nothing done. And it really sets it back. It sets, whatever business that you're trying to grow, it sets you back. If it's, I'm sure some businesses grow during that time, but mostly it doesn't. In the healthcare sector, if you have a lot of Muslims that work there, I mean, Muslims could only work 6 days a week, 6 hours an hour, 6 hours an hour, 6 hours a day.
A day.
Yeah, and that kind of, how do you cover the patients? That becomes another challenge. It's a whole challenge dealing with that. So yeah, I mean, it was a lot to take in. My first year there, I was culture shocked, even though my background is from the Middle East, but it was a real culture shock. Like, okay, like is this what it's supposed to be? I don't know. Maybe they're doing it wrong. You kind of start making excuses. So.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like a lot of those little things that I would do and I would see others doing, the midnight snack or napping all day, I think it did defeat the purpose of what Ramadan is supposed to be about. I think there are elements of it that are good in the sense of, appreciating how lucky we are to have what we have in terms of food, to put ourselves in the shoes of those who are less fortunate, and also to kind of experience a little bit of, especially in this hyper consumerist materialist world, to appreciate the simpler things of family, community, and like just a meal, and also denying ourselves certain things when, especially if we're more affluent, we have access to so much. So I could see the value of a lot of those things, and I would say it was because of those things that it was my favorite part of being Muslim.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is tough without it in that sense because, like in my life now, I guess it's been a while for you since you practiced. It really feels like a different thing, and there's like nothing really equivalent. I know I did a live stream maybe a year ago, maybe the year before that, where I just kind of discussed what could be something that would be like a secular Ramadan, the same kind of way that, you know, a lot of people celebrate Easter, but they don't actually go to church. They just do the Easter eggs and the bunnies and all that. And I don't know. I think there is something nice about having like a time period in the year where you celebrate family and community and have, you know, communal dinners. What do you think of that kind of idea?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's something that I practice in a way. I mean, there's the whole intermittent fasting thing, right? Where people purposely fast. And I think during that time of year, if people can just fast, if they want to drink water, I think that's okay, you know, and then just wait and celebrate with their families if they can eat together. If they want to have a cup of coffee, maybe that's okay. You know, I don't know what that would look like, but it's something that they can still, and the previous caller also mentioned, it does build character. You know, not everything about it is horrible. You know, it builds character, builds self-control and discipline. It also makes you appreciate what you have. You know, like I'm sure we're going to discuss a little bit what's going on in Gaza now, you know, what they're going through. And, you know, like I feel guilty sometimes when I'm thirsty now and I can just get up and just get a cup of water. Right. And that's, you know, that makes me feel that how lucky I am and how difficult it is for those people experiencing that.
Yeah, very, very well said. I feel the same exact way. So yeah, we can talk about your thoughts on Gaza and Israel in a second. I just want to let anyone know, if you want to call in and share your own Ramadan experiences, the link to call in is pinned in the live chat. And let's see the status of the poll question. So it was a question for ex-Muslims: is your life better after leaving Islam? So it's 56 votes in so far. Yes has it with 71%, and 29% say no, which is really sad to hear. There's all sorts of challenges with that, and if you want to call in and just share some of those challenges, or really just vent and share your feelings, I'm here to listen. So you can just click that link. But in the meantime, so yeah, NaZone, like if you want to just share your own thoughts, you can start from wherever you want.
Sure. You know, growing up in the U.S., specifically the Northeast, I had a lot of Jewish friends. I still have Jewish friends. It was never, you know, we always felt like, or I felt like, what's going on there doesn't affect how I feel about this person. I'm seeing this person for who they are, and they're seeing me for who I am. And whatever conflict is going on in Palestine or in Israel or whatever, it shouldn't impact us as people. You know, those are bigger than us, and we're not going to solve this issue between us. So it never really got in the way of me having Jewish friends, and I still have Jewish friends. How I feel about it, what's going on now, it's not a religious issue, and it is, and it's not. That's why it was hard to explain. It's not a religious issue because it's a humanitarian issue. It's a freedom issue. It is in a way because when one group is saying that this land is promised to us by God, then it becomes religious. And the other group saying that it's also promised, then it becomes religious. But what's happening on the ground is not religious right now. It's a people who are under occupation, and there's no justification of what's happening. Now, you know, the first question people always ask: do you condemn what happened, you know, on October 7th? Of course, everyone should. You know, when any civilians are killed, you definitely condemn that. But it's also, at the same breath, you have to condemn what's happening on the other side, where they're also killing civilians. And it just makes me really sad that there are people in this community, ex-Muslim community, that I've looked up to, including AP and some others, that are still, they're so, I don't know what's going on in their head, but they're so angry and biased against Islam that they're dehumanizing all Muslims. And there are a lot of Palestinians who are ex-Muslims and who are being killed, and there are Palestinians who are Christians and other possibly other faiths or no faith, right? And they're their anger and their bias has not really translated. I mean, has translated into them being unsympathetic or have no empathy for what's going on there now. And that's been really hurtful for me. And, and not just the ex-Muslim community, there are, celebrities and other people that I've looked up to that you expect more. And what keeps me going is I feel that just like in most things in history, we're going to look back on this. And I know that people on this side, when I say this side, I don't mean Palestinian side. I'm just saying the people who are not cheering on the genocide, people who are saying, hey guys, this is not good. Let's stop killing each other on both sides. We're going to look back 5 years, 10 years, whatever it's going to be, and we're going to be on the right side of history. And that's what keeps me going. And you're already starting to see that in the breaks in politics. Like recently, Senator Chuck Schumer in the U.S., he made the speech calling for the resignation of the Prime Minister of Israel. Now that it's just placating. It's really not a big thing. But for him, who is of Jewish descent and who's really a strong supporter of Israel, they're already kind of seeing the writing on the wall that this is not going to look good, in history. And they want to say, hey, at least I did this in a way. So that's what kind of keeps me going. And every day I just feel horrible what's going on there. It hurts me. My family's not from Gaza. My family's from the West Bank, but there are things going on in the West Bank as well. But it's not as devastating as what's going on in Gaza.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Zone. Like I know, just like speaking for me personally, when I decided to like talk about all these issues, it was so hard to just put it out there, especially on the internet, where there are going to be ex-Muslims, there are going to be non-Muslims who are going to think the worst of us for having what I would say, especially from what you just shared, like a very even-handed, respectful view on the whole situation. So thank you so much for sharing that. I know it isn't easy.
Thank you.
Yeah. How does it make you feel, because this is my challenge in this, is because I already don't feel like I belong amongst other Muslims, particularly Palestinian Muslims who come from the same place I come from, including ones in my own family who are practicing. I don't feel like I fit with them exactly in terms of my values, but then on the other hand, I see the situation where it's just being described as, oh, well, it's Islamic terrorism, extremism against a secular, peaceful society, which is how it's sometimes framed. So I kind of feel like I'm in this middle ground where I don't belong in either group. Do you ever feel that way?
Oh, absolutely. And I felt that a long time ago when I was still a Muslim, when I would go and visit my family in Palestine, where it's like, you're not quite Palestinian, right? Because you're not from there. But when you're in the US, you're not quite American, even though you are, right? You're the other. So I felt that in even before I was an ex-Muslim, and definitely like now, but as I've gotten older and kind of, did things in my life and traveled and so on, I found that there are people who are different places in their life. So I try not to, I meet them where they're at, whether it's intellectually, whether it's financially, whether it's, because I see myself in a lot of people where I was at certain points in my life. So I try to connect with them on where they are. Like, when I was a teenager, I had a very different outlook on politics and religion and family and everything else. And, as I grow and people grow in different ways, but as we grow, we experience things, differently. And so I try to meet them where they're at. I don't try to change them, and I don't think I'm better than them, right? I respect them. Now, they may not know everything about me, and I'm sure some of them, if they knew that I no longer believed, maybe they would have less respect for me. But I don't let that get into my head that much. I just try to be present to the time that I'm spending with them. And now, if a subject comes up where I'm asked about something, about religion, I just say, like, kind of what you said. I'm not really religious,
I'm not practicing. Yeah.
But it depends on my relationship with that person. If that person, my relationship with them is deeper than that, then I may go into it. It depends. And I've done that. It becomes very frustrating sometimes, when you're trying to develop these relationships with people, and then they find out in a way, but you don't make. I try not to make it a center of who I am, if that makes sense, right? Like what I was gonna say when I was gonna get on is about the term ex-Muslim. I try now that term I learned later on, but I think I'm an atheist first, because it's not like one day I said I don't want to be a Muslim anymore. I just, through my research and listening to different people and so on, I no longer believed in God. And how can I be a Muslim if I no longer believe in God, right? Because the principles of atheism also apply to Islam and other religions. So I'm more of an I'm more of an atheist than I'm an ex-Muslim. So I just happen to be, Muslim. So like I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. It does. No. I think that it comes down to the crux of the issue is like you didn't have an issue with Islam per se. It's more of the overall thing of, well, if I don't believe in God, then I by default don't believe in Islam anymore, and by association Christianity, Judaism, and other religions.
Right.
Yeah. I have a question for you though. By the way, I really applaud your attitude, your philosophy in terms of how to approach others and view others, especially that element of seeing people where they are at and not trying to think that you're better than them. So I know that's like a rarity to have that kind of attitude amongst people in the world. Why do you think you were able to develop this attitude as an atheist?
Good question. Because I've met so many different people in my life that are different than I am, whether it's where they're from, also I think I was married to a Muslim person and then a non-Muslim person. And then I get into different cultures, whether my significant other is Muslim or not. So understanding other cultures makes you appreciate for who they are, because Muslims think they're the best, Christians think they're the best, Palestinians think they're the best, or not all of them. I'm saying just in general terms. And when you see that other people are just as good as you, and in some ways better than you, and so you respect other people. And I think it comes from a sense of respecting people just in general and appreciating them for just who they are, whether they're straight, gay, whatever, wherever they are. So just seeing them as who they are. I think I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Yeah. Thank you. I think that's like the really important thing to me. And, because some Muslims will say, well, of course, the two of you left Islam because you went to the Western world and you were corrupted by it. You've probably heard this kind of stuff before,
Sure.
Or seen it anyway. And I think for me, what actually is going on in that kind of situation is it allowed us to see a culture beyond our own culture, especially being Palestinians living in the diaspora. We don't really belong anywhere. We see all these different cultures. We immerse ourselves in all these different worlds. My parents actually, I briefly lived in the UK near London, and I was enrolled in, I think it was an Anglican school. So I learned what Christians believe, what they practice, and I saw it from their perspective. And I think all those experiences, what they led me to is not being stuck in this presumption of my own superiority. And it also led me to kind of critically examine the things that I was told were true. And here's the interesting thing. If you talk to a Muslim or a Christian or whoever, they would actually say, oh, that's a great thing to be able to do. But their assumption is that will lead you back to the truth that they believe in. And they don't like it when it leads people to other truths. So that's always the challenge when you're an ex-Muslim, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, just practically speaking, if you were just to look into the future of what Ramadan is going to be like in the next 10, 15, 20 years, I mentioned earlier about how, what if it ends up being like, Easter, where a lot of people in the West, they don't really celebrate Easter in the a Christian sense. They don't care. They don't care about Jesus. They don't believe in Jesus, but they still do Easter stuff. Do you
Right.
see something happening like that with Ramadan, at least in the Western world, where you have the lanterns, you have even the iftar kind of idea?
I look at it slightly different. I'm, like I said, I'm mid 40s, a little older than that, and I remember when Ramadan wasn't what it is today, and kind of going back to the Palestinian, the way, at least for where my family is from, it wasn't religious centralized, I guess, in a way. Like if you look at just the way people used to dress, like I remember growing up, there was Palestinian traditional wear, right? So, over the years, it went from different types, and I've seen it, from the traditional, like the ones that, you see at the protests that people are seeing now, or, if you visit, the embroidered dresses, to then there was something called jilbab. I don't know if you're familiar with that, right?
Of course, yeah.
And then from that, then it became the abaya or whatever. And it's a progression that I think it will eventually go back, to where, because Islam has taken over a lot of the cultures. And I think there is a little bit of an awakening to say we are more than just Islamic culture. And as we hopefully go back to that, it will, I don't want to say de-Muslify, whatever the word is, the Ramadan, but it was going to make it more secular. Like the way we practiced Ramadan when I was younger is we would fast, we would go to Friday prayer, and then the Eid was really, well, everything came together, and we just went around to family where the men would give their female, a gift, give them money, and they would sit down for tea, and it was just family being together. Where I've seen it now, then there's prayer after, and then the prayer is centralized around prayer, where that really wasn't the major part of the celebration when I was younger. Yes, it was there, but it wasn't the major part. It was more about, fasting and then being with family.
Mm-hmm. It makes me think about how there's like all of these external factors when it comes to these sorts of things. And I'll explain what I mean. I think what happens sometimes, and it's like a human nature thing, where once some people sense major changes coming, they cling to the ways of the past more than they did before. So perhaps you could say, just like overall, like the Muslim world has probably seen that the world is shifting in the secular way, and that things like capitalism are reigning, or that the Western way of life is the one that's taking over, and so they cling to tradition, and in the Muslim world's case, Islam more. And there was someone earlier in the live stream who was commenting on this. I think that so I Am What I Art was saying that as a kid living in North Africa in the 1960s, all my parents said to me was that there's a God, he created us, he loves us, but sees everything, and we should do good things. So there was no talk of apostasy, Sunni, Shia. I never wore a hijab or felt the need or pressure to do it. Until I moved to the Gulf states did I become aware of all the unbelievable beliefs people had about Islam. So this is, I assume, later in life, probably as an adult, to like work in the Gulf. So I think we've seen that too, where we go back to the old ways, but it doesn't seem like it, but it's actually a good thing because it's forcing these issues out into the open, and it's part of the necessary process of transitioning and moving past it.
Yeah, like one of my arguments when I was deconstructing with my faith and my discussion with my family is like, as these things, it seemed like there were always updates to the religion. It's like, hasn't this been religion going on for 1400 years? Why all of a sudden, like, this is the way it is? Why all of a sudden this is the way it is? Like, did we not know these things in the past? Like, oh, they didn't know how to read? Like, why are we always discovering new things to add to the religion, making it more than it used to be? And I think there comes a point where it's just people just want to live, right? My purpose is I don't want to see Islam go away, because just like I don't want to see Christianity go away. It doesn't really help me in any kind of way. I don't like for where it is now, of how the impact it's having on people's lives now. I can't change what anyone thinks. So, I would like them. I wish there were more atheists, or I shouldn't say that, because there are atheists right now that I don't agree with, right? So I wish there were more people who are just more caring in the world. I don't care what your faith is. Just want people to be caring and treat other human beings with respect, regardless of where they're from, their color, their race, sexual orientation, doesn't matter. And that's really, where I'd like to be. I don't care what you believe in, right? As long as you're not harming other people, because there are people who are, who love Marvel. I don't like Marvel, right? It's just how it impacts the rest of the world, right?
Are you saying Marvel is a religion?
For some people, right? But there, as long as what you believe does not impact the lives of other people, like keeping your faith and the public square separate.
Yeah, no, I totally see where you're coming from. Like, I've always had this internal debate about religion, of like how much to be critical of it, because I think I feel the same way as you do. I'm just also aware, that people's beliefs, they can seep into like a lot of like little things that they do or don't do. And when they're religious ones, it's so hard to dissuade someone, for example, from believing that they're going to hell, or that their child is going to go to hell because they don't believe anymore. So I don't know how to navigate that. The best I can think of is, I think we agree on this, that like neither of us are saying we should force people to not practice a religion anymore, because that would be, can you imagine a dark dystopia where that was the case?
Right. Exactly.
I mean, you could say that's what happened, like Soviet Union, era Russia. So we don't want that. For me personally, I'm hoping we can get to this point where we feel like we don't need religion anymore. But I would never just say, get rid of it right now, in this instant, because that's not going to lead to anything good.
Right.
Yeah. But NaZone, I think you mentioned that you got to go.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say before you leave?
Just want to say thank you. I really appreciate all the work that you're doing. I appreciate the message that you're putting out there. Just thank you. And I hope we can talk again.
Yeah, please. Like next live stream, I would love to have you on again. This was a real pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye.
All right. Okay, let's see what the status is of that poll question. So for those of you who just tuned in, so I left a question in the live chat. You can vote in it if you want. So it's a question for ex-Muslims. Is your life better after leaving Islam? And so it's like a 75-25 split almost. So the majority, 74%, say yes, 26% say no. And I think the reality is, in many cases, it's like a little bit of good and bad. So your life is better in some ways where you don't feel like you're living a lie, or maybe your life circumstances have improved, but then it's worse because it's impacted your family, your family relationships, your personal relationships, and maybe even it's led to spiritual issues, crises. So I think that's often the case. It's like a little bit of both for a lot of people. And I think I'm going to wrap this up in a little bit. So I don't see anyone else in the waiting room. I'm so glad people tuned in and were willing to share their experiences. This is really great. There's a super chat here from Amon Ra. And the question that Amon Ra asks, when you were Muslim, how did you justify the bad parts of the Quran? There are 4 places in the Quran that says, good chaste men practice polygamy and sex slavery. Muhammad did this also in the Hadith. So thank you so much for the super chat, Amon Ra, and a really good question. So I would say for me, because I was young when I was Muslim, there were elements of things where I didn't know about them when I was Muslim, and specifically sex slavery. So the way it's worded in the Quran is kind of abstract and vague. Often it's referred to as what your right hand owns, for example, and I didn't understand what that meant, and I didn't understand the context. This is where having what they call tafsirs are really important, where scholars will actually input their explanations of something in the Quran, and some Qurans have those explanations embedded within them. And so I didn't know that sex slavery was permitted or condoned, whatever word you want to use, in Islam. And I know after I left that the usual defense or explanation of it is that this was something that was meant for that time and place, for that society, and God didn't intend for it to exist now, and that he wanted society that was so dependent on slavery at the time to transition away from it. And they'll use other parts of the Quran or Hadith to justify that by saying that God wants everyone to have freedom, equality, love and respect for each other. So that's the usual defense. So I didn't even know that when I was Muslim. So the other question of like polygamy, I did know about that as a kid. And I just felt like that's the way of the world, you know? So men have this responsibility to take care of women. Men are typically the ones who are in the workforce, the breadwinners. And I didn't see it as a thing of equity or consent or anything along those lines of, well, what is the woman's perspective on this thing? And that was just like my own ignorance on it. I just felt like, well, this is the way it was. This is the way it's supposed to be because, you know, God says it is. So when it came to that kind of thing, I used little to no critical thinking. I just accepted it for what it is. And I would say that's true for a lot of the things that I would say now, today, as a former Muslim, are the bad parts of Islam in general, like the vilification of homosexuality. I was homophobic when I was a Muslim, and I couldn't tell you why. I just thought it was wrong because it was wrong, and it was repulsive because it was repulsive. And it really took me leaving and seeing those kinds of biases, these prejudices with an objective, critical mind, that I realized, oh wait, I'm believing these horrible things for no reason, or for no good reason, I should say. So thank you again for that question, Alman Ra. There was a question early on in the live stream, so I'll just do a couple more questions here and then I'll wrap things up. So Gerwalk was asking, how do you feel about changing your Uber name? So for those of you who didn't see that part where I was talking about that with Zara. So in Canada, a lot of Uber drivers come from a Muslim background. And when I was using my real name on Uber, what I noticed is I would end up in these conversations. So often very awkward conversations with the Muslim Uber drivers where they would be talking about things like the corruption of Western society and the challenges of raising children in the Western world when, you know, they're selling sex everywhere and they're teaching sex education to 6-year-olds and teaching about trans and stuff like that. And I'm just sitting here. I just want to get from A to B. I don't want to have this big metaphysical or moral conversation with this random person, because if I think one time I did mention, oh, I don't practice anymore. And the Muslim asked me why. Oh, why don't you? And I don't want to explain my whole journey from leaving Islam in an Uber drive. So what I did as like a simple way of just getting out of those conversations was I just changed my name. So people can't tell that I'm Muslim anymore. And sure enough, those conversations, those really awkward conversations, stopped. And how do I feel about that? It feels kind of crappy that my identity, my name, will always be associated with this religion that I feel doesn't express my values and actually stands for a lot of things that I think are horrible, very harmful, and that are the cause of a lot of problems in the world today. And there's nothing I can really do to control that because my name is my name. I've never considered seriously anyway changing my name to something that wasn't Muslim, of a Muslim background. And so it's like, again, one of those things where I feel like I'm just kind of stuck in the middle, where I know my name doesn't really reflect who I am in terms of my lack of Muslim identity, but I don't want to just change my name just because I'm not Muslim anymore. I think that's the thing I take away from it most, is I feel like, speaking as an Arab, there's a place for me, there's a place for Arab society to exist where it's not revolving around Islam, and I want to be a part of that. And I guess it just sucks that in this kind of really minor way that I just can't even use my name without, dealing with those frequent reminders of how I don't fit in with other people from my background. So I hope that answers your question in a convoluted way. Let's see. There was this one question from Mir Jalal. It was meant for me and Zara. Can you recommend the 2 most important books that impacted your lives? I mean, pre me leaving Islam, I would have to say the Quran, because I held it in such such reverence. I would dust it and I would carry it with such respect and reverence. And I felt like this is like the most wonderful, beautiful thing, like this conduit to the creator of everything. And I really remember having this feeling of awe, of wonder, of really touching something that was supernatural and divine when I looked at this book and read its pages. And it's interesting to me how that's all gone away now. And it really just shows how perception and your own beliefs and prejudices really influence those kinds of things. And post leaving Islam, that one's like a bit tougher for me to answer. But just to have like that symmetry, I would say one of my favorite books of all time is Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses, which I would say, beyond all the controversy about it, I just think is an amazing, wonderful, incredibly detailed and nuanced book that explored something that was really personal to me, the challenge of doubt and certainty when it comes to living your life, and it's tied to religion. Because with religion, you get certainty and you kind of push away the doubts, but those doubts still remain, and those doubts can impact your life, especially when you're denying them. And beyond that, also, there's a lot of the book it's not just about a parody of Islam. That's definitely a part of the book, but it's much more complicated than that. The Satanic Verses is also about the challenges of being someone caught between the East and the West. And this is something that Salman Rushdie definitely experienced, and it's something that his characters in the book experienced. And it's something that I experienced because I don't belong in the Muslim Arab world really fully, and I don't belong in the Western world in the conventional general sense either. So I think that really resonated with me, and I highly recommend anyone to read it. His style is a bit challenging to get used to in the beginning, but then you do get used to it. So those are my two most important books. And yeah, I think that's the last question. Mir Jalal also asked, what are your views on Sam Harris's analysis on Gaza, Israel as a Palestinian ex-Muslim? I think you should make a comprehensive response video to his points. That's a great question. I have seen that video pop up on my recommended videos. I haven't seen it yet, but I definitely should. Sam Harris is someone who whose books I really liked, and I thought a lot of his thoughts, ideas were interesting. I think he's kind of gone off into the deep end, out of the deep end, whatever that expression is. He's kind of veered off what he used to be, I think, in more recent years. So I'm curious to know what he thinks now. I think, generally speaking, when I heard him talking about Islam, he came off to me as someone who didn't have a really comprehensive, thorough understanding of it, and just had some broad, good points about it that were probably common with Christianity in terms of critiques. So yeah, I'll look into that, and maybe I will do a video about it. But yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope for anyone watching who's an ex-Muslim, I hope you managed to get through Ramadan in one piece. And if you want to just share your own perspectives or thoughts in comments on this video once it's up after this live stream is over, please feel free to do so. I try to read all the comments. And yeah, thank you so much again. Please subscribe to the channel if you really value this kind of live stream, and I'll be able to do them more often, hopefully in the near future. And like this video too, so it reaches more people. And last thing I should mention, there is a Patreon and a PayPal if you want to support the channel that way as well. You can find all the links in the video description. Thank you so much, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are. Bye-bye.